For my artifact, I decided to have a conversation with two of my cousins in a podcast format where we talked about different topics that can be found in two articles in our textbook. The first one being Disposable Strangers, Mexican Americans, Latinxes, and the Ethnical Label Hispanic in the 21st Century by Suzanne Oboler. And then we also talked about topics in the article titled Guatemalan Origin, Children's Transnational Ties by Cecilia Monjivar. We had really in-depth conversations, and it was really eye-opening and beautiful to see how the topics found in these articles are very applicable to our own lives and our own identities and our own relationships with being Latino, Latina, and even our relationship with speaking Spanish. So without any further ado, here is our podcast. This is my cousin Alyssa. Yeah, we both share grandparents. Her dad and my mom are siblings. And I wanted to start off this conversation by asking you, what does being Latina mean to you?
I feel like because of how we grew up, it was always like we have to be proud of like our culture and everything. And I feel like for me that's very true. But I don't speak Spanish that well. Like I am proud of where I come from and everything, like my culture. I feel like because I don't speak Spanish, people look at me like I'm not as Latina. Being a Latina to me means like still being proud, even though I don't speak Spanish. Like that's not all of it to me. And I feel like even though I don't speak Spanish, I'm still really proud of my culture, like where I come from, my history, and like all of that.
I would have to agree, because I feel like there's this really toxic and like negative connotation that like because if you don't speak Spanish, it means that you're not Latina enough. And I feel like that's simply not true. There's a lot of Latinos in the US who don't speak Spanish or maybe understand it and don't speak it, and it doesn't define how Latina you are and how Latina you aren't. We talked about not speaking Spanish. Like, is it harder for you to identify as Latina because of that, or do you feel Latina enough?
See, I do hair, right? And I get a lot of people who speak Spanish. And they see me and they automatically just start speaking Spanish. And because of Abue and Grandpa, like I do understand most of it. But sometimes they just get too fast. And I'm like, okay, we need to slow it down. And like sometimes they're like, oh, like what are you? And I don't have any hesitation saying I'm Mexican and Puerto Rican. I'm very proud of it. So I don't think because I don't speak Spanish as good that I'm any less Latina than the next person.
Speaks volumes, Liz.
I'm like, I don't care. I'm very proud of what I am.
Yeah. When I went to Guadalajara over the summer, everyone was like, oh, they're gonna know you're not from here, like you're not gonna be able to pass for a local, like your Spanish is good, but it's not like that good to pass.
I'm like, if yours is good, what is mine gonna do?
Like when I went, everyone was talking to me in Spanish. Like no one ever questioned like my abilities of being to be a Spanish speaker. And like, I don't know, I feel like for me, Spanish is a cool way to be able to connect with people, especially when I get to go to Mexico. And like, I feel like it's just easier for everyone, I guess. And like, even at home, like with Abba and Grandpa, like they speak English, but like it's a little broken sometimes. And like, I'm like, I want you to feel comfortable in your own home to like express yourself however you feel more comfortable, and that's Spanish for them. And I feel like for you as well, like because you grew up around that, you're able to understand it fairly well, and that's why now you're able to piece everything together. I guess, what was your experience like growing up in a Latin household? Like, how was that for you and your own identity?
See, it's kind of funny because I was thinking about this earlier. I was like, I wonder what she's gonna ask me. And Abba definitely tried her hardest to get all me and my siblings to learn. But I feel like the biggest takeaway was like I'm able to roll my R's because of her. So like her and all the tias would be like, all right, we're gonna give you a tongue twister, and they would be so proud that we would be able to do it. But like coming from like that, and then I think it was just really hard for me being able to piece it together because I had like Abue and Grandpa, and then I had my other grandparents. And both my other grandparents are Puerto Rican, so they speak very
Mm-hmm.
different Spanish compared to Abue.
Yeah.
So I think with that, and then going to a mainly like white, like high
Mm-hmm.
school, all girls,
Yeah.
I was like one of like 6 Latinas.
Mm-hmm.
So I think going between that Spanish, and then being mostly around English speakers, it was
Mm-hmm.
kind of hard for me because I was like, okay, I know this Spanish, but then wait, here comes my other grandparents. And I
Yeah.
think that was like kind of a harder thing because I was like, okay, these are completely different. And I'm trying to
Mm-hmm.
pick up both at the same time, but also focusing on my English. Like it was all over the place for me. And I just kind of
Mm-hmm.
like got nervous that I wasn't sounding like a Latina enough.
Yeah.
So felt like I was like, you know what, I'm just going to ignore it, try not to even speak it so I don't sound
Mhm.
white.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to stick with English. Because,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
when I
Yeah.
talk to clients, like, if I need to, I could survive if I got lost in Mexico and needed to get back home. Like, I can do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't feel confident enough.
Confident enough. Yeah. I kind of feel the same way. Like sometimes I have to like think about what I'm gonna say and to make sure that I like say it correctly and like it's not a made up word because Spanglish within itself is like another language.
Right.
And like I forgot the other day, like I was trying to say something to the tias and I was like, oh yeah, locación. And then they're like, that's not even a word. And I was like, what do you mean? It's
You see what
location.
I meant?
And then tia was like, no. Se dice localidad. And I was like, I'm so sorry. Like,
Please, give me a,
it's
can I take a
I'm
breath?
losing it a little bit. I'm like, understood what I was trying to say. Did you ever feel like embarrassed that you couldn't speak Spanish?
Yeah, all the time. Anytime people say, like, oh, but sorry, you look like you do. And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, thank you. So what do you do then? Like, how do you, like, people are like, do your parents, I always, the second somebody asks me that, they always go, well, do your parents speak it at home? Do you speak to your grandparents? How do you talk to your grandparents? And I'm
Hmm.
like, we have good conversations, thank you. I was like,
Yeah.
they talk to me, I talk to them, like there's no
Yeah.
wall there whatsoever.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
like, why does my parents speaking or not? Like, this was fully on me. My dad tried. My mom tried. This was on me. I
Yeah.
felt nervous and I just kind of like anxiety. Anxiety just got to
Yeah.
me. And that's
Yeah.
basically why I chose to not speak it.
Do you feel like culture can get lost within each generation?
For us, no. I would have made sure, like, because we would
Yeah.
spend weekends over there. Like, we would
Yeah.
go
Yeah.
over all
Yeah.
the time. Like, I would always made sure that we knew, like, what traditions were coming up. And, like, I think coming from, like, such a Catholic household, like, I
Hmm.
think both of our parents are very old school, like, like, Hispanic parents.
Hmm.
So we go to church every Sunday, like, we try to. And, like, I went to Catholic school my whole life. So I feel like them not forcing but pushing me into that like kind of community, and then
Yeah.
also having like Abue, I feel
Hmm.
like we kind of grew up still on the same train as them. Maybe we're in the back of the
Yeah.
car, but definitely on the
Yeah.
same. um but like with Joshi and them, I do feel like it's not being, like I
Hmm.
said, it's not forced, but I don't feel like it's being pushed onto them as much yet.
Yeah.
And I feel like my dad is really trying.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
like I
Yeah.
feel like as long as we keep trying to guide them,
Hmm.
we can only keep so much. I don't know. I definitely do feel
Right.
like it's being lost a little bit, but
Yeah.
not entirely.
Like even though we didn't live or grow up in Mexico, we're very much still Mexican with
Hmm.
an American flair. That's how I look at it. I think even in our values, like family is such a huge thing in Mexico, and like
Yeah.
us being here, it's like even bigger because I feel like we value it more.
I feel like family and like religion is still very heavy in our like family because
Hmm.
every Thanksgiving we do a part of the rosary. We do like, like we have all
Yeah,
these
yeah, yeah,
traditions
yeah.
that we do to keep that alive with us. It's like if
Yeah.
you think about it, we do every holiday together.
I feel like our family in a way is a little bit different from most families in the sense that like there's no separation between like, oh, you're my first cousin and you're my second cousin. Like we all are each other's cousins and like to an extent. Some of us grew up like siblings. Like there's like a fine line between cousin and sister, and it's like
Yeah.
that's so cool. That runs our relationship even deeper as a family.
Everyone is all over
Yeah,
the
yeah,
place.
yeah.
But like at the end of the day, you're right. Like there is such a fine line, and it's like we're all on it. We're all like, no matter what happens, we know
Yeah.
that
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
we can count on each other.
Right. What do you think of like the perception of Latinos in the US? I feel like Latinos are these really cool people. I feel like because we get such a bad rep in media and politics, it takes away our positive image and we automatically get attacked by all these negative connotations about us.
Like I was thinking of like I feel like after certain like presidential like stuff happened, I
Mm-hmm.
just feel like people are like, "Oh, so like when did your parents come here? And do they have like a green card? Like how do they?" And I'm like, "You sound so ignorant." What?
Yeah.
First of all, that's none of your business if I'm legal or not. Second of all,
Right.
who do you think you are to be asking me that? Like I feel like people have gotten so comfortable with like asking those kind of questions.
Mm-hmm.
Like ignorance is so real. There is so much that like everyone deals with, but I feel like because we're Mexican and we're American, we have like double standards.
Right.
And I
Yeah.
feel like it's hard for us to be enough for either. And then I feel like
Mm-hmm.
with all the world like has their own thoughts on us and everything, I feel like it's hard to be proud of it.
I feel like people look at like Latino and they think illegal, they think foreign, they think migrant, and it's like criminal, rapist, like all these things that like a former president put in a lot of people's heads. And
Right.
it's like I am none of those things. I am just as American as you are. I feel like they make it paint like we don't belong here. And
Agreed.
it's like frustrating. Have you ever felt like Latina wasn't a sufficient label for you? Did you ever feel like this doesn't fully represent my identity as being someone who is both Puerto Rican and Mexican, being from the Caribbean and from Latin America? Like, how has that ever been a question for you?
I don't think so. I think for me, like, because like Hispanic to Latino, like that has changed and
Mm-hmm.
it's like just a very wide
Yeah.
range of people. I feel like for me, I don't feel any more Mexican than I do Puerto Rican, and I don't feel any more Puerto Rican than I
Mm-hmm.
do. So I feel
Yeah.
like for me, it covers it because I'm not just one, I am both.
Yeah.
And like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to say, oh, I'm Mexican, oh, I'm Puerto Rican. I am both. I'm a Latina and I'm proud of it. Like, I come from very two different cultures
Yeah.
of Spanish speaking. And I think for myself, I do like that word for me
Mm-hmm.
because I feel like it is, I'm not one or the other. I am both and I am a Latina. That's it.
What would you say to other Latinos who don't speak Spanish, who kind of might feel I'm Latina enough? This being your experience, like you grew up very Mexican, very Puerto Rican, but you lacked the ability to speak Spanish, and that kind of caused questions within yourself, but also how you interact with people and your own relationship with your culture.
I just feel like, who cares? Do you feel Latina enough? Do you practice what your family has taught you? Are you proud of where you come from? Like, there's questions that you need to be asking yourself and
Mm-hmm.
silence other outside voices. And there's your answer. Like, if you don't feel Latino enough, how can you improve that in yourself? Like, I know all these traditions, and I feel like because of my my upbringing and everything, I am proud of who I am. I'm proud of our traditions. I am proud of our culture. I'm proud of everything that our family
Mm-hmm.
represents. I feel like because I had that, I am okay. I'm still confident as a Latina. Like I
Mm-hmm.
am who I am. And if I don't speak Spanish, that doesn't demote me as a Latina.
Right.
I'm not like,
Yeah.
oh, she's a little white Latina. No, don't say that to me because I'm not. I'm a
Yeah.
Latina. I'm
Yeah.
proud of it. Like, all right, who cares? Do you feel Latina enough? Do you feel like you embody what a Latina means to yourself? There's so many
Yeah.
different definitions. What is your definition? Because my definition is I am proud of who I am. I am educated
Yeah.
and I am proud. I am proud and I take pride in my culture. I mean, I wouldn't be who I am without all of everything that has we've talked about, like
That's good.
the grandparents
Yeah.
and everything, like all of that upbringing, like that's what I don't know. I feel Latina
Yeah.
now.
So this is my cousin Adrian. We our grandmothers are sisters, so we grew up like brother and sister, which is kind of cool. Um, to start the conversation, what does it mean to be Latino to you?
To me, I think it's like understanding where you come from and what you decide to do with like all the opportunities that you've been given to. Um, Understanding how far you've come to like get here too. Because I feel like Latinos are no stranger to struggles, especially nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
And it also depends on like what you do to help Latinos like get past those struggles and get through them, because for some people that can be really really hard, especially those living in like not so welcoming areas. So I feel like you need to understand where you come from, and you have to kind of have Latinos backs. You feel me?
Yeah, yeah,
um
yeah.
it's all about like a community type thing.
Community. Yeah. We both grew up going at a dual language program, our grammar school years, middle school years. So like we were fairly submerged into Spanish speaking pretty regularly on a personal level, but also in an academic setting. Um,
Mhm.
do you feel like because once I started college, I felt like I started to lose my Spanish a little bit because I wasn't using it so regularly anymore? Do you feel like once you stopped being in a dual language program, did you feel like you started to lose your Spanish significantly?
Definitely. Like even during like middle school and stuff, like because at some point they just kind of stopped speaking Spanish to us.
Hmm.
I don't really know why they changed that,
Yeah.
but because I wasn't using it like every day like I used to, it was just I don't know. I didn't have any need to like to use it because people in my house speaks English,
Yeah.
and so I just kind of spoke more and more English. And when I really try to like speak Spanish to people, I was like, oh my god, I forgot how to speak it.
Yeah.
Um, and then going into high school, I was just like, I didn't really know anything. Like I could understand it, but I didn't really
Hmm.
know how to communicate through it.
Yeah.
Um, but now that I'm working in a kitchen and like
Hmm.
everybody speaks Spanish, I feel like I'm starting to gain it back more and more. But it's not the same one that I used to speak. Like now
Yeah.
I'm saying words that I didn't know existed.
Yeah.
Um, so I think I definitely started to lose it more after during middle school actually. Um,
Yeah.
and that's when I kind of started like wondering like, oh my god, am I an Osawa kid? Like I was really scared about that.
Me.
Um, and for a while I definitely was. Now I hope I'm better.
Alyssa and I were talking about this of like this negative connotation around if you don't speak Spanish, that means you're not Latino or Latina enough. I guess what's
Mhm.
your take on that?
Because people have said that to me, I don't like it.
Yeah.
Even though like to some extent I like understand why they say that, but
Yeah.
I don't think that's really like the determining factor. Because
Hmm.
if like a white person speaks Spanish, does that mean that they're more like Latino than you just because like
Right.
they can speak the language that you're supposed to know?
Hmm.
Um, I think most of it is just understanding your roots and like being proud of them
Yeah.
and helping other people that share the same roots as you. I feel like Spanish is definitely important. I'm not trying to say that it's not important
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
because it definitely is,
Yeah.
but it also shouldn't be seen as the determining factor, because
Right.
that can be really harmful to some people.
Did you ever feel embarrassed that maybe your Spanish was not as proficient as it was before?
I definitely was, just because like the DS can be ruthless sometimes, yo. Like
We were talking
I
about
was
that
like,
yesterday.
I was like, yo, like okay.
Yeah.
uh, so I wouldn't be like, I don't want to say shamed because that's such like an extreme
Yeah.
word, but they
Yeah.
would
Yeah.
like tease me about it, and I'm like, I don't know what to say. It's like I just
Hmm.
stop using it. Definitely in the kitchen, when I first started at my job, my Spanish was really, really rough.
Mm-hmm.
And so communicating with people was definitely harder.
Yeah.
It wasn't impossible. I wasn't like they weren't speaking like a completely different language to me. Like I understood
Mm-hmm.
it, but I could only communicate back in like bits and pieces.
Yeah.
And when you're with like line cooks, that can get a little scary when your Spanish is bad and they're like looking at you like you're crazy, and I'm like I'm sorry, guys, I don't know. But that was definitely the hardest part for me, just like kind of admitting it to myself. It's just like I don't know what I'm speaking right now. Like I don't know what I'm trying to say. I felt like I had to like kind of speak it like quickly like other people. So I would like trip over
Mm-hmm.
my words, and that made me feel even worse about it because I'm like I can't even speak as fast as like I used to or like as these guys.
Yeah.
Um I think it was embarrassing for me.
Talked about like this lack of confidence with our Spanish abilities sometimes around not only Las Tias, but I think also native speakers, like even our
Mhm.
family that comes to visit from Mexico. Like I always find myself second guessing what I'm saying. Like I've
Mhm.
been corrected 20 bajillion times in my life, and like I still get embarrassed of like, okay, I'm not gonna talk for the rest of the night because that was embarrassing. In one of the articles from my textbook called Guatemalan Origin Children Transnational Ties, they talk a lot about Guatemalan migrant, specifically their children or children born in Guatemala and then brought over when they were children. And one of the sections is specifically just for language, and they interviewed a couple of young students of Guatemalan descent, and they talked about how they didn't want to learn the maternal language because they would be made fun of, or other Latinos would make fun of their Spanish speaking. Do you feel like there's, I don't want to say competition, but like sometimes like rivalry within the Latino community itself of like, I'm more Latino than you because I could speak Spanish, or like I've been to the motherland more, um, so that makes me more Mexican or whatever. Like, do you feel like there's a lot of people compare themselves to each other in terms of like latinidad?
Um, I can't speak for everybody, but
Yeah.
I think for some people there definitely is. I know I've kind of been comparing I would used to compare myself to like other people that were more fluent in Spanish or they were more
Mm-hmm.
like in touch with like the culture, and I was
Yeah.
like they're probably more Mexican than me.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say again. I don't want to speak for everybody, but it definitely just depends on the person and how I think it depends on their background, like what they've been
Mm-hmm.
exposed to, and if they've been exposed to like that kind of toxicity or not.
Yeah.
Um, and if it's like, I think if it gets to a point where you're just kind of doing it just to say you're more Mexican than people,
Mm-hmm.
then that's not being in touch with like your roots and your culture because you're not doing it for yourself. You're doing it for other people. I feel like,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
um,
Yeah. For sure.
yeah.
Um, in the same article, Latino or Hispanic are good terms to represent the diversity of Latin and Central America, or do you feel like you can answer this broadly or like for yourself, like do you feel like this term is sufficient enough, or should there be more terms or a different connotation with the term?
I think that kind of grouping people together just because they're from like this part of the world is definitely like
Mm.
harmful because then you'll have people saying like, oh, like you're Cuban, like isn't that like similar to like this and this and this? And it's like,
Yeah, yeah,
whoa.
yeah.
um it's you definitely need to what's it called, respect like people's different cultures and different backgrounds
Yeah.
and where where they grew up, and you can't just kind of group them together like that.
Hmm.
um because especially now I can see how people just like see that as super harmful
Yeah.
because it, yeah, oh man, I don't even know. I think we definitely need to find a way to kind of distinguish like where like what
Like
specific
Afro
countries
Latino
people
and
are
stuff like
from.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah,
um
yeah.
I don't know how we do that. I I don't have the what's it called, the knowledge for that,
Yeah,
but I think we definitely need to work on that because I think it was they probably saw it as fine in like the
yeah,
70s and like the 80s and stuff, but now I think that we're recognizing minorities cultures like more. I think it
yeah,
would be
yeah,
a
yeah.
perfect opportunity to kind of expand on the term and say like, okay, um Mexicans are very different from, I don't know, like Cubans or something, instead of just
Hmm.
grouping them together
Yeah.
when the cultures are so different and like they're their own people.
Hmm. Yeah, 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 for sure. I feel like through the media and like political opinions, like people have this image of what a Latino or Latina should look like. Like, for example, like in movies and stuff, like there's the Latino or Latina represented is always like a white presenting
Hmm.
Latino or Latina, like kind of like the actors and actresses you see like in telenovelas. Like there's no like diversity within that. Like there's no Afro Latinas being presented as the standard for Latina or something like that.
Hmm.
Like I feel like there's a lot of toxic connotations with that and like not taking into consideration the diversity and complexities that go within being Latino or Latina. What would you say to Latinos who may be losing their Spanish? Like, what would you say to them if they're questioning if because of this they're less Latino or not? What would you say to them?
I would say, as long as you understand where you come from and you're kind of not so hard on yourself to the point where it's like, this is the deciding factor of my like culture. Like if I don't do this, then I can't consider myself a part of my culture.
Mm-hmm.
And you understand that you have to kind of stand with other Latinos, then you're still Latino. Spanish is it comes with the package, but it's like I said like multiple times, it's not the deciding factor. And
Mm-hmm.
if you really are insecure about your Spanish, like just practice. Talk to your relatives only in Spanish.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something that happens overnight. Like you're gonna have to put work into it,
Yeah.
but just like being Latino, it's gonna take time. If you feel less Latino, it's gonna take time to kind of get back to where you were before. And like that's okay. Like you don't lose like your brown card or something. Like
Yeah.
you can it's like a spectrum and you can always grow. You can always get more knowledge. You can always be more in touch. But no matter how you decide to do it, at the end of the day, you're still Latino. And I feel like that it should be the main takeaway. Like no matter how un-Latino you feel, at the end of the day, you still are Latino and you should be proud of that.